a pioneering filmmaker and creative visionary whose work in erotic cinema redefines how sexuality is portrayed on screen. Today we're incredibly fortunate to be joined by Inka Winter. Inka is a sex and relationship counsellor and educator, as well as perhaps a better known role as a feminist porn director. Inka has a deep commitment to authenticity and inclusivity. Inka's work challenges conventional narratives by blending artistic expression with a holistic approach to desire and intimacy. Rooted in her personal journey and her passion for reimagining adult entertainment, Inka is dedicated to creating films that celebrate diverse experiences, empower performers, and invite audiences to engage with sexuality in a nuanced and transformative way. As an advocate for holistic porn, Inka strives to bridge the gap between art and intimacy, using her platform to promote conversations that transcend taboos and inspire meaningful change in how we view pleasure, connection, and self-expression. There's a lot there and a lot of questions, so I'm just going to go straight into it. Inka, you're very welcome, and a big thank you for giving us your time today. The first thing I wanted to understand really is, who are you? What formative experiences helped create the person that's joining us today? I've just been reading about your time growing up in a cult without your mother or your father, so I know this weren't necessarily the standard answer I often get.
I I mean it's obviously like a really large question. And you know, we're all shaped by our experiences in a way that you can no longer say who would I be if my experience had been different. Um I think like my experience as it pertains to what I do in terms of pornography and what I now call holistic pornography is that I definitely have grown up in an environment where boundaries were crossed in ways that shouldn't have been. And in a system where sexuality was mandated. And it's definitely made me examine this in a way that maybe other people didn't have to. And so it makes me take those things into consideration even more in my work because I know how it shouldn't be and I know what it feels like when you're not listened to and you're not being heard. So I can anticipate that and try to create an experience for talent and also crew where that just doesn't, come up for people.
So from the experience that you had in the commune, and I guess from that, having a very natural sensitivity, that's the right word, towards the human body and sexuality, what was the journey then that led you to becoming a sex and relationship counselor, an educator, and a feminist porn director? It's not necessarily the natural thing you would think of as somebody that had to grow up in that situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think, I used to think that I make porn in spite of what I grew up experiencing. And now I kind of feel like, well, I make feminist porn. So it's kind of the opposite of what I experienced growing up. So I also make it because of in order to right this wrong. But that's not sort of the journey that I sort of had to come here. It's really that I had an abortion years ago and I lost my sex drive for a while. And so my journey really started in with this personal experience of looking for something to help me find my libido and, rediscover my sex drive. And as people do, looking at porn and just feeling like that really, really, really wasn't working for me. Like the things that I was finding wasn't working for me.
Mm.
And so the journey is really creating something that came out of a need and a lack and creating the thing that I was looking for, which, yeah, I think are a lot of people's ways of inventing something or making something is, seeing the need for the thing. So, yeah.
Mm. And you've used the word holistic a couple of times. How do you define holistic porn? Is it the same as ethical porn? And what are the core values behind the vision in your work?
Right. So, and the defining any terms is sort of like a very personal thing. I think also, when it's the ethical porn, like people define that in different ways. For me, ethical porn is really a lot about how the porn is made in terms of like how talent is treated, how crew is treated. So mainstream porn can be absolutely ethical too.
Mhm.
I think where the line is where it's sort of, I think a lot of mainstream porn is not ethical, is that I think representation is a problem with a lot of companies. So I think, to me, ethical includes how crew and especially talent is treated, and representation. Feminist porn for me means the depiction of what's on screen. Because what happens off screen and on screen are two different things. You can consensually make content that feels very male centric. And so for me, feminist porn is about depicting things and having storylines that are less male centric. And there's a huge spectrum of sexuality. So it's not like that means that all porn is romantic, right? Like a lot of women are into consensual non-consent. But if I do consensual non-consent, it's going to be more obvious that there is consent for the non-consensual part. And it's with a purpose of demonstrating that it's not just like, oh, this person gave their permission off screen and now they're doing something that feels kind of like icky on screen. By having this conversation and involving the viewer and showing the viewer that this is only happening because both parties agree to it and both people want this, is very different to just showing the thing. And so it's part of that. It's partially things like, if I shoot a scene where a man is like cleaning the house and that leads to sex, obviously the male gaze wouldn't consider this as a scenario that leads to sex, right? So there's a multiple like sort of things that I feel make porn feminist, in my opinion. Holistic, I think, is basically, it has to be ethical and feminist for me to be holistic. And it's something that goes beyond that, because I consider like relationships with talent and sort of their well-being just in a like even more. And I like include education into my film. I'm hoping that with what I do, people don't only get like visual, like pleasure through the visual element, but they're also kind of on a more holistic level. There's some sort of like sexual healing and awareness and conversation and all the elements that, by being more like, I'm looking for a different word than aware, but I can't find one, so I'm just gonna say aware again. By being more aware and considerate of what you're doing, I think your overall sexual experience changes, and that's what I mean with holistic.
It's really interesting you said about the education part. I talked to a female performer in mainstream porn a few months ago, and I was asking her what it's all about porn and access to porn, etc. And she said the one thing that people shouldn't come to porn for is education. And she was talking about mainstream porn and some of the very unrealistic situations people find themselves in, unrealistic body shape, sizes, degree of amount of hair somebody's got, etc., etc. So she was saying, yeah, it's for her and her team, it's entertainment and it's not about educating. Whereas the work of yours that I've seen, it certainly has a story, has a narrative, and it does guide you in a different way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I would still agree with this other talent that it's not the mandate of porn to educate. There should be sex education for that.
There should.
And this idea of porn is that it is entertainment. I just, for the porn that I'm making, chose to include this and make it my mandate. Not because it has to be, but because I want to, you know?
Mm. So just looking at your work as a counselor for a second, when people come in to talk to you, first of all, it's a big thing to put your soul, your property in someone else's hands. So first of all, they're giving you huge respect and trust by coming to see you. What do they hope to gain from your guidance? What do you think people look for when they come and talk to you?
Yeah, so while I feel like I sort of say that I have the specialization in, sex education and counseling, people really come to me for counseling in really anything, like, anxiety, depression, all of those things. And I think that um what sort of defines my work as a counselor is that through my own trauma and my own healing, I can approach everything in a very trauma-informed way, and from a place where I have experienced a lot, if not to say most things that people are going through. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I experience the exact same, like, sort of scenario that people have experienced, but I've experienced the feeling and the emotion of that scenario that people experience. And so I can relate to people on an experiential level, not just on an intellectual level. And I think that is what people come to me for specifically.
Do you sometimes find that when people come to see you, I always worry about this. Some people are in a very caring profession. Do you ever find the situation that they're discussing triggers negative thoughts in you? How do you look after your own mental well-being in such a situation?
Yeah. That's really a really great like question. And I think for me, I think as a therapist, you have to go through a lot of your own therapy in order to come to a place where you can listen to somebody and sort of have that distance and the space for yourself.
Mhm.
And for me, it's all about sort of meditation and mindfulness that brought me here. Um, Obviously, like, talking about your trauma and doing therapy, like bringing awareness helps. But for me, like the main component is awareness and mindfulness to create the space between my own feelings and what's happening in the world on the outside.
Mm. Something must be, so hard not to become part of the situation as opposed to being able to support the situation.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think for me, like, objectivity is less difficult. I think in the beginning, it was just hard not to take on people's feeling as much.
yeah.
Because people tell you, like, really traumatic things, and then sometimes you walk away from it feeling just really like now you're depressed and you're like feel all of the pain that was triggered in you. And I think that for me was more the work than
Mm.
being able to be objective. I think there was a point, and I don't know exactly how this happened, but I sort of remember it distinctly, like letting go of the idea of being right. And I think that that's something that you need as a therapist in order to let the client have their own feelings and feel like you're not projecting your thoughts of what they're feeling onto them, but their feelings are real and valid and they're right. And you're just here to help them process those feelings. But whatever those feelings are, they're still valid.
It's funny you say that. Again, I talked to somebody a while ago, and they were talking about the difference between talking openly to your best friend and talking to a therapist or a counselor or a guide, etc. And she was the thing is with a best friend, they bring their predetermined knowledge and their view of what's right and wrong with them. Whereas when you go to a therapist or a counselor, they don't know anything. They don't know anything about you, so they have no preconceived notions of if it's a couple, who's right or wrong, or if it's an individual, how they're living their life. So yeah, it's really interesting to say that about letting everybody's thoughts, statements be validated and be valid, but not putting your answer or your ownership on what they're saying. Because ultimately it's down to them to help themselves with your guidance, really. You can't fix them as such. You're there to, almost let them talk and let them look into themselves, really, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, I can reflect back to them what they're saying to me in a different way. And I think for me with my work, I'm doing very somatic work. So I just am helping clients to stay in their feelings. Because, that's just nothing that we learn in our society. Feeling is not encouraged. So for me, it's, I think, and that's the thing about mindfulness and meditation, it's learning how to be in discomfort. And that's really the only way to kind of process and grow. It's not about getting rid of the discomfort. It's about being with it and still being able to exist at the same time.
It still surprises me somewhat. So we're in, 2025 now? And it still feels that society is still sex negative. And by that, my understanding of that is that it's not talked about. We really don't get properly educated. I'm not sure the schooling system where you are, but in the UK and the US, well, UK in particular, you're sort of told about safe sex in terms of wear a condom, consent, which is good, and sexually transmitted diseases. So very much the sort of almost the medical side of things. There's never any talk about different types of sexuality.
Right. And the problem side of things, it's approached from this avoid these things, but not do these things in order to feel pleasure. It's more like a don't do this, don't do that, but not a like, here are some tips.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that's down to that we still hold on to historical religious teaching? Is it the political? Is it the society in general that we still feel uncomfortable with this topic?
Yeah, I mean, and obviously I'm in the US, so, politically.
Yes.
So,
I do, yeah.
Anyway, but so I think it's definitely a little bit of everything. I think it's partially religion has sort of brought in this conditioning. And so religion, I think, definitely is I guess one of the origins of the sex negativity, the shame. I mean, shame and guilt, right? Like what else does religion bring to sexuality? Shame and guilt. And I think from what I can see in this country is that sort of obviously now it's taken on a life of its own, and people lack the awareness that it is coming from religion. And so now, and I see this, obviously, this is not just about sexuality here in this country, but it includes sexuality. It's outsourcing your misery onto everybody else. So I think the political agenda here is deeply influenced by outsourcing the people's misery that are in power onto everybody else. If they can't enjoy sex, nobody should. If they can't be happy, nobody should. And
Mm,
I mean, we don't have to go into what's happening in this country right now, but I think it speaks for itself.
it does. Yeah. So I think people get very hung up on what sex actually is, and for a lot of people, sex is penis in vagina penetration in a sort of in a heterosexual couple. That's what sex is. They don't ever think about. And it's interesting. Your company is called Foreplay Film. They sort of think of foreplay almost as right. We do all this stuff to get to the main event, not thinking about actually the stuff itself is sex. And if we replace the word sexual pleasure, it would
Mhm.
feel a lot more comfortable. So what would a good sex or good pleasure education look like to you?
I think really the main thing is to teach about communication,
Yeah.
because good sex and pleasurable sex is very different from person to person. So the only real way of finding out what that means to your partner at the time is to ask them. And you can, however you come in with whatever experience you have, that's like your starting point. And you can try something, but you have to be open to feedback, and you have to be open to the fact that just the things that have worked in the past for some partner might not work in the future for another partner. And that doesn't make you wrong. That doesn't make you inadequate. It just makes your partner different from your previous partner. And so I definitely think that sort of creating a more open space where communication is okay, and then teaching about how to communicate and how to take no as not a rejection, but as just another answer to a question. It's just an aspect of something that they don't like. It has nothing to do with you. They didn't reject you. So I really think communication is where it's at, and teaching that and allowing that and encouraging that. Yeah.
I think we also get to a phase in a relationship, whether you've been with somebody for sometimes not a time issue, somebody for 2 years, 20 years, 40 years, you might have had very good communication at the beginning, you found out what each other like, but over the course of 10, 20, 30 years, that might well have changed. But we never, well, I think I assume people don't necessarily go back and revisit and say, and because you might have done something in the very first few months, I don't know, you might have loved having your neck bitten or something. And then actually over time, you think, oh, God, it's going to bite my neck again. And I've never really liked it. But sort of 20 years down the line, you either explode with, don't bite my neck, or you sort of try and say, that thing you've done for the last 20 years, I don't like it anymore. Because our body shape changes, we go through pregnancy, we go through menopause, we have erectile dysfunction. Lots of things happen. We go through pregnancy, we go through postpartum, we have depression. So many things happen. So to assume that our likes and our turn-ons remain the same for 1 year, 5 year, 10 years, 20, 50 years, when you think about it, it's not rational, but I do think we don't have continuous
Mhm.
communication. Makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I think, when I was doing all of the studying for all these certifications, what kind of stood out is the Gottman like method, or looking at things, and
Uh-huh.
and they've done a lot of research on couples and what determines whether or not they have good relationships and sex lives. And definitely sort of this couples being friends, communicating, and being a team is sort of the main, like, determinating factor of, do they make it and do they have a good sex life. And so this friendship and teamwork, like communication, is part of that. A good friendship and a team, you can't work in a team without constantly giving feedback to each other. Otherwise, somebody's doing one thing, the other is doing a different thing, and the thing you're trying to do is going to break, And so, yeah, it really comes back to sort of the constant feedback to your partner. Yeah.
When you start to work on a new project, a new film, what's your creative process like? How do you find the right talent, the right crew, the right setting, the right story? Where would you start?
Yeah. So I do two different things. So for
Mhm.
foreplay films, I mostly do these like very simple storylines. I have a couple of feature films, but not as many. And then I've directed for other companies where there's like bigger feature films. And so when there's a more set story, um obviously like, the inspiration comes from things that interest me, like I did this thing for like Ashford Man. I was a
Mm.
Regency period, series. I've done this. I'm just finishing up this sex in vignettes, and I was interested to portray sex in everyday life situations that are usually not portrayed in porn. So like the first thing is like it's a fight, and then they have makeup sex. So it's just very like sort of authentic sex in real life, and that's just something that interests me, and I think I look at things in a more sort of like this holistic psychological way of sexuality as part of your life. So that's sort of, I think, for me, for like stories, they usually I want to tell something that has a little bit of a feminist view, at least, like sort of, tells female stories. For these like smaller scenes, basically they need context for sex. So that it doesn't have to be like dialogue, it doesn't have to be like this huge whatever, but there has to be a little bit of a storyline that provides context for why sex is happening and it's not the pizza man, right? So so then like that mostly comes with the talent. Like I have talent that I like. I have a lot of talent approaching me now, so it's a very symbiotic relationship of me finding talent that believes in what I do, because a lot of mainstream porn they do as a job and it's great, and then like, and there's money and this and that, but I think a lot of talent come to me to kind of do something for their heart or their soul that sort of like fulfills them on their creative journey. And it's a very collaborative process where I brainstorm with them and I find out what their likes are and what their visions are and what talents they have that are not like adult related. And then from this brainstorming session, I create a storyline for them specifically. Um, Obviously there every once in a while there's some stuff that I'm like, oh, this would be fun to make, and then I'll find somebody who wants to do it.
Mhm.
Sometimes I see a location and I'm like, oh, this is a great location. What can I plan around this location? Um, so yeah, there's different ways of getting to a storyline, but they're usually very collaborative and very sort of talent centered.
That's really interesting. You sort of preempted a couple of questions I was going to ask. So one was about Ashford Manor, which I watched the first one. I haven't seen the rest of them yet, which is a Brighton-esque sort of Regency, beautiful
It's
costume,
like
beautiful setting. It's stunning.
based on Jane Austen and Bridgerton, absolutely.
Mm. And it's nominated for more awards than I think about. And but I saw an interview with the Best Actress winner, Nicole Kidman, and
Yeah.
she said what you said, that when she came on set, she was very surprised at the first questions you asked her. Well, so what do you enjoy? What do you like doing? She's not, what? Why are you looking at that? She's used to being told what to do. She said it changed her life. And when I've talked to people in mainstream porn, it really is very much a production line and incredibly long hours and starting incredibly late in the day with some crews that aren't as respectful as you'd hope. And I think that shows in the quality of the film. And did you, because the film Ashford Manor, it's of a quality that would be on a television drama. And yes, it had some amazing sex in it, absolutely. But it is it's a good story. And did you really enjoy making that? I felt very different.
Oh yeah. So I mean, obviously the scale of film, with the period
Yeah.
costumes and the locations and whatnot, like it requires a certain budget. So having Lust Cinema produce this and be the financier of this really obviously helped. Um, but at the same time, I feel like I approach all of my films with the exact same, that, and Nicole and I are friends now, and we've shot other things since, but like that really how I approach every single project, regardless of how big it is or how small it is. And I think that's sort of what we have so much fun on set. And I think what I love the most about set is sort of this connection and this sort of, there's almost like a sense of love, that's there. And that's because I care about creating a space where we're all just like happy doing what we're doing. And yeah, I guess Nicole is a very uh she talks very openly about, her experience with me and has given me a lot of credit, which, is really great of her. Yeah.
It almost acts as a counterpoint to lots of the rest of the industry, I guess. If she sees that as being something very unusual but very welcome, it just
Yeah.
shows the rest of the industry operates. And I did want to just briefly touch on that. So I guess a lot of people access to porn tends to come from the porn aggregators, so Pornhub, new porn browsers, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know they're all owned by a company called ILO, and they across them they get around 10 billion hits a month, which is extraordinary. But they are snippets of they're showing out, as you said before, it doesn't go through the whole story behind it, it doesn't talk about consent, it just goes straight into the act. And I just wondered what your thoughts were on porn giants and the role they play in it. All feels so far removed from what we do.
Yeah, there's just so many topics in this because I feel like, obviously, like, kind of just looking at Pornhub, remove, like, I mean, Aiolo exists because Pornhub, which
Yeah.
they used to be called MindGeek, blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah. But Pornhub is here and came to this point where they are with the money that they have because they started by stealing other people's content and
Yeah.
putting it on their site. And as much as they've changed and they do better now, I feel like it's just an origin story that we cannot forget and anyway have feelings about. I think nowadays Pornhub can act as a marketing tool. However, the problem with Pornhub is that the algorithm caters to quantity.
Mhm.
So whoever posts the most will show up higher in the algorithm. So companies like me who make quality over quantity have a very small chance of on Pornhub to be seen
Mhm.
because I can't post that much, basically.
Mhm.
And so then Pornhub is kind of like making porn stay the same because the algorithm caters to the thing that exists and it caters to people seeing the thing that exists. And the more it's being seen, the more it's being, emphasized to be there, right? So I think that's my biggest my biggest problem with Pornhub. And I have talked to them about this um and then so with then there's these bigger companies like browsers and whatnot. I think there's really there's a lot of different things. There's different aspects here because on set, a lot of those bigger the bigger mainstream companies, most of them are local to LA,
Mhm.
and they do have I guess, more or less ethical standards, because it depends on the production team that's running their show, right? So let's say Brazzers has, I don't know how many, let's say they have 10, 20 directors and producers. Depending on which set you're on, the set itself can be more or less ethical, right? And so as a big company, it's hard to say what they are, because some of their directors will have problematic traits, and some of their directors are amazing. Like, Marvin Love, who is a friend of mine, who is a great director and a great person. He directs for Brazos, right? His films are great, but he's like, one person there. Anyway, so it's a kind of a complex theme. Then obviously what Brazzers showed, it's, we're the person, the statistical person that buys the most porn is, the cis white men. And so the what they are showing is catered to their demand. And then what is their demand based on, right? Like, so like porn existed after society. Society existed first and made porn in society's image. So a lot of the sort of like what we're into and what we're looking for is part of how we're conditioned. How do we think about women? How do we think about sexuality? What's our trauma? And so this mainstream porn, I think it has a role, and I'm like not against it at all. I just want to make this clear. I'm not against sort of like mainstream porn, but I guess, and it's funny. I think I had this conversation actually yesterday, but we are kind of, with a lot of people I'm talking about, fast food versus gourmet food. Like that kind of porn is like fast food porn. And then what I'm doing is more like a gourmet porn. It's like we've thought about it. We have sort of evaluated the ingredients with the food that we're preparing. We want to not just sort of like, make you full, but we also want to kind of give you this other experience. Whereas like with fast food, you eat it, it sort of hits those sort of endorphins. It has the high fat and the high salt and maybe the high sugar, and it makes you full, and you're kind of like okay for a little bit until you want more. And I think that's sort of, how I feel about porn. And that's, I'm not saying I'm not saying anything against it. There's definitely, obviously, there's a wide range of porn, and some of it is problematic, period, right? But also, I think in LA, the bigger companies that are here are highly regulated, and for the most part, doing things correctly. There's industry standards. Most sets have consent talks. Everybody's tested. So the porn industry is also not sort of the evil thing that it's made out to be. It's an industry, as all the industries, that is flawed, has good things and bad things, right? But again, like in LA and here, this industry is very regulated. There's definitely other parts in the world where I'm like, I have no idea what's going on there. And the porn that's made there, I'm not going to defend it or say anything about it because I don't know what it is. And I'm sure there's some good stuff, and I'm sure there's some not good stuff, So anyway, it's a very complex and big topic.
It is, and I think I think what a lot of people don't necessarily think about is for a lot of the big players, so like say it was MindGeek and now Ilo that own these big companies, it's a massive data play. If you've got all those data points from billions of visitors, and you look at the end of the year, the sort of porno breakdown, it'll know exactly which city over-indexed in MILF porn versus, I don't know, next door neighbor porn or whatever. And it's all of that. Like for the fast food thing, well, you know you're going to go in, it's going to be a burger. Okay, it's going to be MILF porn. Whereas for your porn, for erotic porn, you get there's a menu and you're not sure what you're going to get, but you know you're going to enjoy it. It's all about the taste and everything else. And fast food is handy when you want a quick fix, but it is a challenge when I think the average age that boys in particular access porn now, typically on one of these sites, is 12 or 13. And that's pretty young, and that's before you really know what a relationship is, what intimacy means, and you're suddenly thrust into this very loud, very sort of shouty porn industry. And I just wonder how it will affect young people, because that certainly wasn't the case when I was growing up. It wasn't a magazine that your older brother might have had, and that was it,
Yeah.
which was amazing at the time. But a Playboy magazine compared to clicking on Pornhub, it's a
And
very,
I
very different world.
Right, and I would even say that the porn in movies that was made back in the 70s or whatnot was a lot more artistic, and it was more
Yeah.
about story, and it was different, it was more gourmet, in my opinion. And I think, I think this is sort of where I would come back to what this other performer said before. It should not be the role of porn to educate young people about sex.
Yeah.
I agree, but the problem isn't that young kids are coming to porn like that. It's because they're not educated. Like, I don't know what exactly, like, I haven't sort of I don't know the schedule of education in Germany, but I know there's like in grade school there's going to be consent education. And so by the time you're kind of like a teenager, the education about sex is going to be the kind of education that's going to make you be able to have a more discriminate point of
Um,
view on what you're encountering. And I think that is the problem. Like the fact that young people see porn, the problem is that they don't know how to scrutinize because they have not had any education about it.
well,
And so really, again, I think the problem is the lack of education. It's not porn. And obviously, porn needs to be age appropriate. Like, there should be regulations about who can watch it and when they can watch it, all of that. And obviously, the way to do it isn't what's trying, there's this whole age verification topic going on in this country, and actually also in the UK.
yeah.
And the problem being that now, the responsibility legally is being put on porn companies, which I feel like really should be on the parents. That's why all our devices are made to protect children from porn. All the parents that I know have the strictest scrutiny about what their kids and how much of it are they accessing online. So there's really no reason for this witch hunt, because if parents were responsible about this, kids would not be watching porn. It's really that simple. And so what's happening here isn't just sort of that this responsibility is placed on porn companies. The people that are doing it, the ultra conservative, they're very open about the fact that what they really want is to ban porn. They're saying it, they're not even hiding it. And so now there's two problems. A, they're trying to ban porn. B, they're trying to do it in a way where when you have age verification on a website, people are required to put in their government identification. And with the world and the internet and hacking being what it is, and now, I mean, AI is going to make hacking like a whole new, it's the level of what means safety on the internet in terms of like data security and privacy has entirely shifted with AI. And to make somebody give their identification in order to be able to watch porn, I mean, it's crazy in terms of the fact that somebody could steal your data is now made just so much easier.
Yeah.
And B, we are living in a time where our government is basically making lists again about things. And so suddenly you're ending up on a people who watch porn list that's being publicized, and now you're being fired from your job because it's just like it's a very not far-fetched scenario.
Hmm.
Because it's literally happening in this country right now in other ways. So yes, anyway, that's what I have to say about age verification and sort of this attempt for from the conservative to ban porn.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. There was a piece in the press this week. I think the 5 different fetish websites like kink.com, Live Industry, where there's BDSM.com, whatever, got hacked. It's like there's 250,000 records that are now available on the dark web, or there's names, addresses, phone numbers, credit card details. And like I say, it's once something is digital, you've got to assume it just somebody can access it. Because no matter
Yeah.
what safeguards you might put on, password, whatever else, somebody can access it. It's like somebody breaking into your house and going into your drawers and stealing a file from your drawer. It's so much easier to do it digitally. And if somebody just decides to, then exactly to say, why on earth would we want to tell the authorities in any country really
Yeah.
something that needs to tell them? So it's just such a futile aim to try and ban porn. Well, we've had pornography as long as we've had society in different guises. It's not something that's just in the last few years. Yes, it's become much easier to share and much easier to access, but it's always existed.
Yeah, I mean, not for no reason do we know that prostitution is the oldest, profession on this planet. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
But I think so I've got a teenage son and a teenage daughter, and I certainly spent a lot more time talking to them about porn than my parents did with me. And my parents never mentioned it to me because it was a magazine, that was it. Whereas now, I've certainly felt a real duty of care to explain what it is they might come across, what it means, what reality is really like, and just a situation that they might find themselves in, and expectation management, I guess.
Yeah.
Because if you've only ever seen a woman with no hair on her body and she's happy being with 1, 2, 3, 4 men, and or whatever,
Yeah.
how do you take that out? No, that isn't real. Real is one-on-one. This thing is you can't. So I think as a parent, it's not necessarily the most chosen topic you want to talk about, but I like to think about it hard. Once we were talking about it, we had a proper conversation about it. It seemed to hopefully resonate a little bit. But I do think we have a responsibility because we can't rely on the schools. We certainly can't rely on government. We can't rely on external agencies to do that. We need to do it ourselves, really.
Yeah. No, I agree with that 100%. I think that parents need to educate their children about sexuality and porn. And I think to me, if I think about when I was like a young person starting to be sexually active, I feel like boundaries is something that young people aren't taught enough, that they can have them and that they can sort of create the space that they need or want.
Mhm.
And I think that's the same conversation about porn. The fact that you don't understand what a relationship is and how it works, and that there's two people that both have needs and wants and desires and relationships about talking about them and then merging them and seeing what sort of happens. When you know that and you understand that, then when you see porn, you can scrutinize what you're looking at. But if you don't have the proper education to understand what relationships and sexuality as such, totally independent of porn, you need to know what relationships and sexuality can and should look like for yourself in order to discriminately watch porn. And sort of this idea that now we can't watch porn, that leaves this young person with the same issues because they won't be able to have sexual relationships with their partners in an educated way. So we're really not solving any problems at all because the young person is still there and has to navigate relationships and sexuality in their own lives, and it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But we haven't prepared them in a way that they can make boundaries and stand up for themselves and communicate what they want and feel okay about what they want, being legitimate, normal, or whatever, right? So yeah, I feel like the porn sort of conversation would be less of an issue if the relationship sexuality conversation had been there already. And then I can look at Nobody's ever taught me about porn. I had a sense about myself and my relationships and what I wanted. So I could look at porn and be like, you know what? That doesn't feel good to me. I don't want to see it. Period. The end. Like, no problems were had because I could make that decision for myself about whether or not something resonated with me and something felt good to me.
And that's the point, isn't it? That a relationship and the intimacy and sex that we have should is a terrible word, but it should be enjoyable and fun and good and make you laugh and cry and if it lots of different things. It should be something that we really want to do and enjoy. But I do think you said it very well. I think porn is almost this big black cloud that the conservatives pull around over people because it detracts from the fact that, you know, we ban books now anywhere and we'll have certain lessons we're not allowed to have anymore, and it takes people's eye off that ball, which is the important one, which is about intimacy, relationships, and making good choices. But they have this one cloud that hangs over them that you can one badness.
And you know, what's really upsetting about that whole conversation too is that look at all of the laws that exist to protect people that are not really enforced. You know, women are being raped all the time. And is anybody prosecuted, or does anybody really care? No. You know, like, what's happening in the households, like with children, what goes on there, what, you know, like, we know that if there's sexual abuse, it's going to come from a family, from somebody close by.
Yeah.
You know, so I feel like there's so much where women and children are not being protected. And now we're making up this issue that's like, no, the most harm that's coming is really not from there. It's all the other things that we already know exist, that we already have laws for, but nobody is prosecuting anybody, you know, in a strong enough way. But now you're coming and you're like just abandoning porn because that's the solution. How is that gonna change women from being sexually, you know, assaulted or done? Nothing. Just prosecute people. Use the laws that you have. So yeah, I feel like this sort of conversation is even more complex because there's a over prosecution of something while there's an under prosecution of the real issue that's existed forever. And there's laws for all the things, you know, just, yeah.
And I think one of the things people don't necessarily realize is that by far the majority of sexual assault, rape, etc., happens with somebody the person already has a close relationship with.
Yeah.
And a member, friend, etc. It's not necessarily the headline grabbing, somebody on the street grabs somebody off the street and drags them away. It really isn't. It's the neighbor, it's the uncle, it's the husband, it's whatever. And I think in the UK, the statistic is in the UK, for every 100 sexual assaults or crimes that are reported, very brave to report, one makes it through to conviction. 1 out of 100. And you don't know how many more than 100 were never reported. And people have lived with, but to have the bravery to go and report something like that, typically from a family member or a close family friend, and then, because I still don't think we handle victims. That's what they are. People that have been trafficked or assaulted in a compassionate or meaningful way, and that is important.
Yeah,
that is society.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like everybody that makes porn agrees on nobody should be trafficked. Child pornography is not okay. But again, those things are illegal. Those are illegal things.
Yes, absolutely. They're not okay. They're against the law.
They're against the law.
Yeah.
And sort of this conflation of like porn and trafficking. I'm like, one is a legal thing between consenting adults. The other one is a fucking crime.
Yeah.
Stop the crime from happening, prosecute the crime from happening, and know how to separate the two, you know?
Yeah. I think that was wasn't that one of Pornhub's big challenges originally, that they didn't have age verification of the talent, so they had to take down, 75% of their content?
I
So
mean,
it's just insane.
that's sort of the obviously this is sort of the history of Pornhub, right? So Pornhub was there, MindGeek, had no regulations. Who was trying to get regulations? The porn industry. The
Yeah.
porn industry has been complaining about Pornhub for years and years and years and years and years and years. Visa and MasterCard already like has terms and conditions that basically Pornhub was never in compliance with. So they could have done something way before. But suddenly there's this New York Times article and everybody's losing face, and now the change is happening.
Yeah.
But the problem was there before. Visa and MasterCard could have done something because Pornhub was already violating their terms and conditions. They only did something when there was press. And now it's all this like big thing and blah, blah. Like, you should have done something years ago. Pornhub obviously saw the light once Visa and MasterCard removed their service. Pornhub.
Yeah. For the light that they were forced to, yes.
Overnight, Pornhub reformed itself. And you're like, we've said things for years. Don't blame the fucking porn industry. You know? But yeah, anyway, so yeah, there was a huge problem with Pornhub for all the reasons, and it was a problem and nobody denies it. And then now they changed their ways and now everything's above board and things are different. But that article like had to come out, and anyway, yeah.
Do you ever see any challenge between the films that you make in terms of creativity and art and the desire to also see them as social commentary and positive activism? Does that make sense as a question? So I was saying, is your desire, you obviously want to have a wide spectrum of sexual identities, cultural, different ethnicities, etc. So you want to do all those things. But does that ever come up against the sort of creative story that you're trying to tell?
No, because I just make a creative story around the values that I have, and I think it's entirely unproblematic. So I think diverse representation is easy. I mean, there's definitely there's a ethnicity wise, porn is definitely can be diverse. Like the porn talent pool is diverse, so you can totally do that. Maybe in terms of body shape, there is like a little bit of a skewed towards sort of like let's say better looking people. But to be honest, I think there's really a lot of variation in that as well of like body types. And so it's definitely possible to make porn that's diverse on all the levels. So yeah, no, I don't think that's a problem at all.
I think one of the things in your films and in the Ashford Manor one in particular is that whilst all the talent incredibly beautiful, Nicole's very beautiful, the male talent's very beautiful, very handsome, none of the body types look fake, if that makes sense. There's no all-round plastic. Not saying, oh my gosh, I'm sure I could look like that, or it's horrible. Not about it. It's just that feel like a real person, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's also like that, that's where casting comes in, and I do that on purpose. I mean, I think Nicole just has the perfect body. It's just sort of like flawless.
Yeah.
In all of the ways that society like looks at bodies and determines whether or not they're flawless. And then I want to say both Nolina and Jasmine are like, I think they're perfect too, but they're definitely a bit more rounder and they have a few more curves and, there's just like, femaleness going on. And that's just the choice that I make, to cast that way. And then the same with the male talent. They're both good looking, but they're also both sort of not sort of the totally ripped, sort of like 0 gram fat, or like they're just like good looking men,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just you gotta cast. And again, like, ethnicity wise, like why not put a black female talent in the lead role of British period piece? Why not? And I think that's the one thing that I liked about Bridgerton as a series, that it already did that. Like in the first episode, it had the male character was, a black
Yeah.
person. But they did a good job of bringing that diversity in. So I feel like that was like a good place to kind of continue and sort of, do this sexual version of Bridgerton.
Yeah, and its popularity proved that people wanted to see people like Nicole Coughlan, who's a very vivacious woman, and they loved seeing that. So people really, yeah, it was almost the opposite of no issue. It was a positive that there were so many different shapes and sizes people could say, "Oh, like, yeah, gosh, that's like me," or "I'm like that," or it really, really worked really well.
Yeah.
I've taken a lot of your time, sorry. One more couple that would go. What does the future hold for you? So you said you just finished more simple now, with the
The
setting.
second, yeah.
Yeah. So what happens? What happens next for you?
What happens next?
Yeah, for you, what does your work look like? I think.
Well, I actually like May is gonna be I have a bunch of shoots scheduled really for foreplay films, all of the smaller kind of like storylines. Um so I mean I'm just busy doing the thing, once one thing is over, the next thing starts. It's really kind of how it is. Yeah. The cycle of production, one thing starts, the next begins, and just in the spiral all the time.
What is you said at the beginning before we hit record that relaxation is a bit of a anathema to you. So what does downtime look for you? Are you go to the beach for a vacation, or walk in the woods, or you are just don't do that at all?
I think I try to like just spend time with friends. I am lucky that some of my friends have this like beautiful house that, we hang out on weekends and sort of there's a pool and we can do movie nights, and so just trying to relax by removing myself from this. Um I do enjoy good like TV shows and things. I feel like it's definitely a space for me to switch off my brain.
Mm.
Um and then yeah, like definitely trying to get enough like movement and just, moving my body, and, I do like swimming and certain things that help me kind of stay sane. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. You've been more than I could ever expect. So I'm very, very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.